Did you know that most small businesses actually fail because the business owner isn't making any money? Now that sounds pretty easy to understand, right? But there's so many of you out there that are running a business where you are not paying yourself. And if you are paying yourself, you're barely paying yourself. And you know this because you are feeling the pain. Hey, badass business owners, my name is Tammy and I'm here to help you grow your business, but more importantly, grow those profits. And without those profits, you can't get paid because you, the business owner, gets paid off of the profits of your business. Now listen, I've been there. I've run a business where I spent years getting the business to at least break even and do an okay job. But at the end of the day, if I wasn't getting paid, it was stupid of me to leave the business going because ultimately it cost me everything. It cost me so much because I burnt through all of the money that I had. And there's a lot of you out there that are burning through your spouse's money, your savings, you're cashing in your stocks, you're doing everything you can to keep a business afloat that just isn't paying the bills, not just for the company, but more importantly, it's not paying your bills. And I want to talk about that for a minute because like I said, I've been there. I know the pain. And I also know that from dedicating myself since then and to really understand and watch what other people are doing and what they're doing wrong and, the stupid things that I did to try to keep my dream alive, I can share that with you because ultimately you can run a great business. I ran a great business. I had people look at my business and say, wow, you really can't do much different. But due to circumstances and due to the way that, costs were and where things were, it made it very difficult to make any kind of profit to be able to live on. And there's a lot of you that I've looked into what you're doing and you're doing really well. It's just your business is not creating the type of profit that you need to be able to sustain yourself. Now, there's a couple of reasons why the business may not be able to create your profits that you need to be able to pay yourself. And one of the biggest ones, I want to hit on this one right away because I think this hits a lot of people, is you've gotten the business to where it looks like on paper that you make money, right? We look at the bottom line and it does show a profit and you're like, wow, I don't know where it is because it's not in my bank account. I don't see it. I'm not being able to take any money home. I wish I could take that money home. But here's the problem. For many of you, you are being crushed by the debt of your business. And for some of you, we're going to start at the basics. And I just had a conversation yesterday, as a matter of fact, with a brand new business owner or somebody who wants to start a business. And the first thing they said is, yep, I've got my LLC. I've got my idea. I know who I'm going to hit. And I'm just waiting to get the financing for me to stop it or to start the business. And I'm like, whoa, pump your brakes because you do not need to be going into debt before you even create a dime or even see if this is the type of business that you even want to do. And the ironic piece of it was the business they were going to start is minimal to be able to get started. They could easily start that business with the tools that they have already. And then as they grow the business, they can grow and buy more tools and buy bigger, fancier things that they need. But from a mobile standpoint, all they need is to be able to either have people come to them or for them to drive their own car, their own vehicle over to this. But no, it's like, well, I got to have this truck and I got to have this and I got to have that. No, you don't need any of that. For some reason, we've got it in our head that we have to take on debt in order to start a business. And that just is not true. There are tons of people out there that have started their business debt-free. Now, what about those of you that have already made the leap? You've got that small business loan and now you're paying for it. You know what? I wish there was an answer or a magic wand that was going to make that loan go away, but it is what it is. And unfortunately, it really throws things off because loans, other than the interest, are not on your profit and loss. So when you look at your profit and loss, it looks like you're making money, but behind the scenes, you might be paying $2,000, $3,000, $4,000, whatever it may be, to this small business loan or any other loans that you've got going on. Sure, you get to put the interest on your profit and loss, and that at least captures some of it into, you can see what kind of profit. And honestly, if most of your loan is interest, it's actually going to capture most of that loan. Because if you think about it, for some of you, most of your payment is going to the interest. But at the end of the day, getting into debt's not going to help you. You're going to have a plan on how you can include that into what your debt is for the business on a regular basis. So let's just say that you have to pay $2,000 a month towards this debt, but yet your P&L doesn't say it. So what you have to, or your P&L says maybe 1,000 of it because of the interest. You have to remember that your first $1,000 off of your profit is going towards this debt. And it is what it is if you've already gotten yourself in debt. If you're thinking of getting yourself in debt, stop. Don't do it. Unless it's really truly going to improve things, it doesn't make any sense for you to do that. One of the other problems that I've noticed with people when they are trying to pay themselves and they're not paying themselves is they really don't even budget and plan when they're pricing to make sure that they're including themselves. And I get it. A lot of people have to start their business and they sacrifice their pay to get their business going. But here's the problem with that. You start bleeding in, like I was saying earlier at the top of this episode, you start bleeding into your own money, right? So if you have a spouse who's making money, the first thing you're doing is tapping into their income to keep you guys afloat, right? Then you start tapping into the reserves. Maybe you jumped ship, but you had a savings set up for you to be able to get through the first 6 months. Great. Or maybe you've got other means of income that you're able to tap into. Also great. But here's the problem. We don't have a plan to stop doing that. So for example, if you've got 6 months set aside that you are going to contribute everything to dump it back into the business and you've got these 6 months to live on, that means you need to commit and figure out what do you need to be doing in 6 months to be able to get back to where you are being paid. But here's the interesting thing. So many times I ask a business owner, what do you need to make? Well, I don't know. Yeah, there's a lot of hemming and hawing. And I'm like, look, do you need to make $3,000 at the end of the day? Do you need to make $4,000 at the end of the day? 5, 6, 10? What is your number that you need to pull out of the business? Remember, you're getting paid 2 different ways. You, the employee, and you, the business owner. So the employee, you, maybe that's $3,000. You need to make sure $2,000. But that's coming from your labor costs that you're building into your pricing, right? And the employee you is getting paid out of that piece. But the business owner you may have to contribute. Let's just say your monthly net is $5,000 and your employee you is going to get half of that, $2,500. The business owner you needs to make $2,500. That means you need to make sure that your pricing is ensuring that it can pay you, the employee, the $2,500 that you need, right? And that you get the right number of sales and all that other good stuff. The second part is your business has to be profitable enough to make up the other 25%. Because remember, it's not $2,500 in profits. Your profit has 3 jobs. It's got to pay your taxes. It's got to be retained incomes / debt. So money you're putting back into the business or any debt that you have. And then the owner gets paid. So it may be that your profits have to be $7,000 to be able to cover those taxes, cover the debt, cover what you need to put back into the business, and then finally to pay you. You've got to do the numbers to be able to know if that's the case. But what ends up happening is people go, oh, well, if I do this job and it's going to cost me $50 for my labor and for my parts, well, and if I sell it for $100, then I'm going to make $50. No, that's not what's going to happen because you have other costs involved in running your business, and that's going to chip into that $500 first. Any other expenses you have for running the business, it's also going to pay those taxes, it's going to pay those retainers, everything else. And at the end of the day, you may find that you get $10, $15 if you're lucky out of that $100. You've got to make sure you're running those numbers in all those different scenarios. And that's the piece that I find most people are missing. They're not looking at the true cost of what it is that they're selling. I think a lot of small business owners would never go into business if they ever really ran the numbers before they ever did. And I mean real numbers, not those fake numbers that we tend to do. I get it. When we're starting our business, we have to take educated guess as to what we're going to do. But what happens is we have like this dream that, oh, if I do this many people at this many dollars, I'm going to make X amount, which is probably true. But where they fall down is they don't do their homework on figuring out where does the money go once the money comes in. So when they get that $100, they're thinking the $50 like we just talked about and forgetting that they do have these other things that they have to pay in their business. The other thing that I noticed that people do is they'll go out and they buy these big fancy trucks. I kind of hit on this a little earlier. And I love a good truck. You know what? I love a new car. I'm in a 12-step program on new cars. I haven't bought a new one in a long time, but every year I used to. But here's the thing. What people don't realize is you don't need that to do your business the majority of the time. And you sure don't need a $100,000 truck with a bunch of upgrades to do your job. A simple pickup truck that you can get for a few $1,000s is way better. I'd rather see you spend $20,000 on a used truck than you going out there thinking that you need this high-end $80,000, $100,000 truck, because you don't. We want that truck. You don't need that truck. And there are some of you that are listening right now or watching, and I promise you, you're driving around in a truck that you wanted, not that you needed. You needed a truck. You just didn't need the one you have. And I think you're going to find the same thing with tools and everything else that you purchase in your business. There's so many things that we spend money on that we want versus what we need. You can grow the business to purchase the things that you need. Once again, you're sacrificing your salary for these things. You're sacrificing your family for these things. Because guess what? That big truck sitting in your driveway that you're ticking off your HOA and getting them all mad about, guess what? That's not putting food on your table. Now, in one hand, yes, it is, because you're going out and you're doing jobs and it's creating the money. But at the end of the day, could you get by with a different vehicle than the one that you think you need? And you know what I'm talking about for those of you who are doing it. Now, there are some of you out there that, you know what, you've done great. You have not put yourself in a debt situation. You have not over purchased. You haven't been spending your money, but yet you're still stuck in the same thing. Tammy, I can't pay myself. I'm not making the money I need to be able to live off of. In which case, we need to look at your business in a different light, because in your case, more than likely, you have either a sales problem or a profit problem. And one of the things I always want to look at first is, are you profitable? Because I can help you grow your sales. You can go out and grow your sales, but if you're only making 10 cents on every dollar that you make, you're never going to become super profitable. You just won't. First thing you want to do is figure out, how can I become more profitable behind the scenes? Because now, instead of making 10 cents, maybe you're making 15 cents or 20 cents. You know what? I would love a 20% bottom line for you to be able to do those different things. For most of you, 20 to 25 is going to make you a good living on top of your owner's pay, on top of the other money that you might take out of the business. In which case, then how do you create that kind of profitability and then go after the sales? Now, in some cases, as you grow sales, that profitability will come up in some cases, because some of your expenses don't really change, right? If you rent out something, then that rent typically stays the same the entire time. So when you do additional sales above and beyond, you're not having to pay that rent again. It actually lowers the percentage of money that has to come out for rent, for example. So in the beginning, sometimes it's kind of a weird thing. For some businesses, when they stay small, they actually have way less expenses. But when they get big and they start hiring people, all of a sudden their percentage, they might have 25% and all of a sudden it drops down to 15% because their payroll has gone up. So it's kind of a weird thing. Everybody's business, you kind of have to look at a little differently to find out the percentages that with growth comes different things. If you can grow and not change and increase your payroll, for example, a lot of times you're going to improve your expense. That number is going to go down because you're not increasing anything else. But if you have to grow your sales by hiring more people, that is going to impact your bottom line because you're growing your payroll. And that's the largest thing for most people, because for most people, their payroll is anywhere from 25 to 50%, depending upon the business and what they have. The other thing that happens when most people hire people is, remember I told you get paid as the employee you and the business owner you? For a lot of you, the employee you, right, that's getting paid out of the jobs to do the jobs, you're handing that money over to the employee that you hire. So you're no longer paying yourself as the employee because you're gambling and hedging your bets that you can make more of your money off of the profits. So you might give up. It may be in the beginning you're 50-50, right? 50% of your money comes from the employee you, 50% comes from the business owner you. But the minute you replace yourself in the business, you're gambling because that 50%, it might drop down to 25% or less, in which case the profitability has to go up enough to pay you 75% of the money that you've traditionally taken out of the business. Hopefully that makes sense. I know it's obviously hard to do numbers when we're sitting here on a podcast or YouTube video and stuff like that, but hopefully that makes some sense for you. At the end of the day, I don't want you to be a statistic. If 50% of businesses fail within their first year or two, I don't want you to be in that 50%. If 90% fail by year 10, I don't want you to be in that 90%. I don't want you to be anywhere in the middle of all that. If you start a business, I want you to be able to retire from that business, sell that business, make some money, pass it along to your family. Whatever you want to do with the business that you're building, I want you to be able to have options, and I want you to be able to do it. I don't want you to have to close the business because you just can't make any money. And for some of you, and I want to talk to you, for some of you, the best thing you could do is to close your business. I've been there. I've done that. After 5 years of me not getting paid and burning through the money that I had set aside, I finally had to shut the doors. And it wasn't because I had failed. It's just the circumstances of the market at that time. It was during the crash of 2008, by the way. But the circumstances at that time made it impossible to raise the prices any more than I could, but the expenses had gotten so out of control because my business was a retail business, and it was so much of it was locked in between the brick and mortar piece, the rent, as well as the utilities, which were extremely high, and some other costs that just were not going to budge. And it was a math problem. I finally sat down and played with those numbers so many ways, and I was like, even if I can get this thing making some more money, it's never going to be able to pay my bills. You know what? And that's the reality. Sometimes you can make money, but you have to ask yourself, is $2,000 realistic for you to be able to take home to keep your family going? If you need $5,000, $2,000 is not going to cut it in the long run. And if I double your sales, now you're at $4,000. Is that really going to get you that 5? You've got to really make sure you play with those numbers. I promise you, there are other businesses out there that you could probably make or build or grow that are going to make you a lot more money. I went on to do other businesses where I made a lot more money, and I was no longer dependent of my income being given to these hard expenses that my business had. And I was able to switch and pivot to where most of that money went to me. And I not only started hitting my monthly number, but I was able to exceed it most of the time. And that's really what we want for you, as I don't want you having to just scrape and claw to break even, to scrape and claw and to maybe be able to pay a couple of your bills. I don't want you to have to always be looking over your shoulder and wondering how you're going to make ends meet. Okay. Now, if you're living high on the hog and you're blowing through your money, that's on you. Okay. That's just bad spending. But when we're talking basic necessities of roof, shelter, clothing, food, stuff like that, and you're just not able to make that business make the kind of money, you need to look in the mirror and ask yourself, what do I need to do to turn the ship to get this business making that kind of money? And if it's impossible for me to do that, then what is my next step? What is my next adventure? What's the next thing I'm going to do? There is no shame in your game if you have to do that. You've already walked away with so many lessons that you learned in the first business that will definitely translate and go into the next business. Doesn't mean you have to give up on the dream of being an entrepreneur. It just means knowing when to, as Kenny Rogers said, know when to hold them and know when to fold them. And for some of us, that's a hard lesson for us to do. I totally get it. I understand. But at the end of the day, I don't want your business failing because you can't pay yourself. So you need to have a plan. If you're listening to this right now, I want you to ask yourself, is your business bleeding you dry, or is your business creating the lifestyle that you need for your family? And does it have the opportunity to continue to grow and make even more? Because if it does, then let's work on those numbers. Let's figure out, how do you make more money? How can you, achieve all those goals and stuff like that? And for some of you, you have a harder decision to make. Totally get it. Okay. But what I don't want you to do is digging deeper and deeper and deeper into a hole. Okay. I want you to stop the digging and then let's start filling the hole so that eventually the hole gets filled and you can start building on top of that, making more money. But the days of you saying, I'm not going to take any money, I need you to stop that. There's all these people out there. Oh yeah, you should be willing to sacrifice your money so you can build your dream and all that. Yeah, that's great. Okay. That works great for people that don't have responsibilities and don't have kids and spouses they have to help do and everything else. If they've got a fantastic income and you can go do this, fantastic, grow. But there are people out there, I'm telling you, that I talk to that are sacrificing that money that should not be doing that, and definitely not doing it in year 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay. If you're doing it in year 1 or 2, totally understand. But you know what? 3, 4, 5, 6 on, you should not be just dying and working crazy hours 7 days a week because you can barely survive and barely make it. Okay. We needed to have a serious conversation. Hopefully this resonates with you. Hopefully you're asking the right questions and diving into your numbers and looking at things. Watch the videos. There'll be some different tips and things that you can do and whatnot. I've got the course that you can go through that helps teach you your numbers, helps kind of organize it all. But yeah, you can find it on there free as well if you want to poke around. But at the end of the day, I need you to stop working for free. Okay? Stop hustling. Stop going. I don't want you to stop hustling per se, but you know what I mean? Stop working so hard and making no money. That doesn't make sense. Put your efforts into making money, knowing the number that you need. What is that number? Working backwards and figuring out what do you need to do. All right, I'm just rattling. I need to stop because I'm very passionate about this because you guys work way too hard. I want you to get paid. All right. So with that, I'm out of here. And I'll talk to you next time. Bye for now.